Good morning, uh, and welcome everyone to this third session in our knowledge series on hydropower. Thank you so much for joining us from different parts of the world. It's morning here, it is probably afternoon in some place and evening, so thanks for joining. My name is Chandra Govindrajlu. I'm the Joint Practice Manager at Energy Sector Management Assistance Program. It's a partnership at the World Bank helping low and middle income countries deploy sustainable energy solutions to boost economic growth and reduce poverty. Today's discussion focuses on hydropower and jobs. This is a timely and important topic, not only because it contributes to expanding energy supply, uh, but also because creating more jobs and better jobs and supporting economic opportunity and delivering development outcomes. These are all important aspects of hydropower. At the World Bank, we now call jobs the North Star that we all follow and try to align our development work towards that. And hydropower is well suited for that. This broader topic on jobs and economic opportunities also reshaping how we think about hydropower. For a long time, the focus has been on environmental and social challenges associated with hydropower, in addition to, of course, electricity generation. But this is an opportunity and a pivot towards focusing on the broader economic opportunities and jobs. There is growing recognition that modern hydropower projects, when we carefully plan them and deliberately design them, they can deliver broad and lasting economic benefits alongside clean and reliable electricity. So there are two ways in which workforce development can be supported through hydropower. First, hydropower creates jobs across the project cycle, right from planning to construction and operation and maintenance, as we all know, to rehabilitation and modernization. Second, it supports wider economic activity across industries, businesses, agriculture, mining, and public services. Realizing these benefits requires deliberate choices in how hydropower projects are planned and implemented. The scale and quality of employment outcomes depend heavily on project design, procurement approaches, workforce strategies, and the strength of local supply chains and institutions. This includes how local firms can participate in our projects, how workers are trained, how skills are transferred, and how communities share in project benefits, including opportunities for women and young people. We support governments across these dimensions from the World Bank and ESMAP, right from upstream planning and policy support to workforce development, local content strategies, and investment mobilization. So today's session will begin with the perspectives from ESMAP's global experts on why energy is central to delivering our jobs and development objectives, and the important role hydropower can play in that regard. This will be followed by some lessons from Jiji and Mulembwe hydropower projects in Burundi, and reflections from our partners at the International Hydropower Association on emerging global experiences and good practice. It has been a pleasure to work with IHA, and we look forward to continuing our collaboration. With that, let me hand over to Bente to carry the session forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Chandra. Let's first have a quick look at today's agenda. As we heard, we will be joined by more of my global colleagues here in the World Bank Group. So we will begin with Adwa and a presentation on more and better jobs. That will be followed by some best practices examples for how to maximize jobs and local economic benefits in hydropower development. And we will then also dive a bit more deeper into the Burundi case study. I would like to draw everybody's attention to the fact that we have a Q&A at the end of the webinar. So feel free to post your questions in the chat and we will try to respond to as many of them. Joining us for closing remark today is Debbie Gray from IHA. So first, I would like to do a bit of housekeeping. Please note that this webinar is recorded and will be made available on our ESMAP website following this session. Publications and useful links will also be posted in the chat. So by that, I would like to welcome my colleague Adela to give us an introduction and presentation on hydropower and jobs in the World Bank.
Thank you, Bente. So my name is Adwoa Asantewa. I am currently the lead for the work we are doing in ESMAP and the Global Knowledge in the World Bank on energy and jobs. So today, next slide, please. Today, I'll be talking to you about how the bank has been thinking about jobs, especially in the energy sector, and how we are trying to institutionalize job creation in all our operations, as our manager Chandra just mentioned. So the World Bank now has what we call our corporate North Star, which is jobs. And by that, we mean that the jobs agenda is what guides all our engagement with our client countries and also the design of all our operations. So what we call the more and better paid jobs is that the World Bank being and the Development Bank is interested in how our operations, which is the projects that we finance, is actually providing jobs in the countries that we work in. And so by that, the World Bank is interested in seeing how we can create more jobs. By that, we mean more employment and also better jobs, which means better paid jobs. Now we have a corporate scorecard, which is an internal instrument which we use to measure how we do this in our operations. And by that, we look at how our specific operations contribute to creating employment in the countries we work in and increasing the pay and the earnings of the people that benefit from our operations as well. So we do that on two levels. First is at the project level by looking at how our projects create direct jobs, which is the constructing stage jobs, often attributable to our financing. Indirect jobs, which is jobs created in the supply chains linked to our projects, and induced jobs, which is the increase in economic activity in the local economies where our projects are situated. Then we also look at the job impacts at the economy-wide level, which is more connected to our development outcomes. So for energy, we look at how we are increasing the additional energy consumption and how that is contributing to incremental growth in GDP and subsequently labor income. On that, we call the permanent uplift. And by that, we are interested in looking at how our projects make the necessary structural changes in economies so that more jobs and better jobs are created for the people that are beneficiaries. Next slide, please. For hydropower especially, the economy-wide impact is well known. And it is because hydropower provides affordable base load that underpins most of the industrial growth and economic growth in a lot of countries. The estimate is that the levelized cost of hydropower is usually between 2 to 7 cents, which is really among one of the lowest costs of baseload generation anywhere. And that is, you can find the sources in the presentation and by also internal work. Currently, about 14% of global electricity supply is by hydropower, and that is equivalent to about 4,500 terawatt hour as of 2024. Currently, about 28 countries, hydropower supplies majority of the national electricity demand. And so hydropower has a big cost and scale advantage when it comes to creating more and better paid jobs. So the other option and the other aspect of hydropower in creating economy-wide jobs is that we have noticed that in a lot of the analysis that we have done internally and by other stakeholders that hydropower-driven electrification is actually a phenomenon that is observed across a lot of countries. So for instance, this is noticed in Peru, Nepal, and DRC, where the presence of hydropower actually led to increasing access to electricity for a large number of rural dwellers. The second channel through which hydropower actually creates a lot of jobs is through the industrial clustering. We see a lot of industry clustering around locations where hydropower exists. We see that it's still aluminium smelting in Norway, Canada, China, India, South Africa, chemicals and electrochemicals in India, where fertilizer corporation was sited in the Himalayan foothills, partly to get access to power for ammonium synthesis. Now, pulp and power and forestry industries that have emerged in the Scandinavian countries was largely because of the cost advantage that was presented by the cheap hydropower that were present in these countries. There are a lot of several other industries that we have seen to co-locate near hydropower. And examples are provided there. They include cement, textiles and light manufacturing, agro-processing, mining and mineral processing, etc. in Zambia, in Chile, in DRC. Currently, one of the largest energy deficit regions is actually Africa. Currently, I wanted to make this side note that Sub-Saharan Africa has just been able to develop 11% of its hydro potential, which creates a lot of opportunity there in terms of developing the energy resources to scale up economy-wide job impacts, which is the North Star of the bank. The next slide, please. And then on the project level, as we discussed, the hydropower creates jobs through the direct jobs it creates during the construction stages. And what we are finding is that about 29% of the jobs that are created is at the construction stage in hydropower development. And about 65% of it is done in the long-term operations and maintenance, and about 6% is in the supply chains. The peer review evidence also showed that hydropower actually leaves a lot of lasting job impacts after the project has been closed, in terms of skills and human capital development, in terms of infrastructure spillovers by the infrastructure that is built to support the hydropower development, roads, bridges, transmission lines that operate in those areas, the local enterprises that emerge as a result of hydropower development, and the general impacts on the operational economy is actually very long lasting. So I'll end here and leave it for the rest of my colleagues to continue. I'll be happy to take questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Adwa, for a very good presentation. I would like to continue with a bit more of a deep dive into how you can maximize jobs with hydropower projects and the project design. So if we start with the traditional critiques of hydropower jobs. Hydropower is often considered the backbone of power systems in many of our client countries. Yet the conversation around its job creation potential has often been skeptical. And I think that we are all familiar with this critique, and that jobs disappear after construction, field work goes to outsiders, and local communities bear the social and environmental cost without seeing the economic benefits. This presentation and also the work that we do in the World Bank Group is about flipping that aspects and showing that with deliberate design, hydropower projects can be powerful engines of local employment and economic development. So the central message of this work and our work and how we work with the clients is simple, but it is also important. Good job outcomes do not happen organically. They must be designed into the project from day one. And that means embedding employment objectives into procurement, planning, and financing structure, not as an afterthought, but as a core project deliverable alongside all the other aspects that come with hydropower projects. Next, please. So it often begins, and you have a great opportunity with procurement, because it is often the most powerful lever we have available. And we would like to encourage project developers and governments to use preferential scoring for bids that commit to local hiring targets. This can make employment and benefit sharing a condition of contract award, and it will and can incentivize joint venture between international contractors and domestic firms. And we consider this smart project design that builds local capacity and reduce long-term dependency on external expertise. So one of our examples is also coming from South Africa, where renewable energy PPPs, or public-private partnerships, are evaluated using weighted bid scoring that explicitly includes domestic employment creation, local procurement, and economic empowerment targets. So this embeds jobs outcomes into the selection decision itself. Next. Another one of the most missed and consistently missed opportunities in hydropower project is the mismatch between when training starts and when workers are needed on site. So the evidence that we have collected suggests that general trades training should begin 1 to 2 years before construction, and specialized skills such as welding or turbine assembly should start at least 3 or 4 years ahead. And these aspects are quite crucial to plan ahead for, because we need to recognize that it takes time to obtain a welding certificate at the required level. But I think that it's also important to remember that this training curricula can be co-designed with project developers, not only for hydropower projects, but in the general infrastructure area space. They can match to project needs that are in the pipeline, because these skills are transferable between projects that require welding or high-skilled aspects. So you're not only building a workforce for a project, but you can also build a workforce for the wider sector. One example that we have from our project portfolio is Rampur in India, where a 70% local hiring requirement was embedded in the project from the outset. And when pre-construction training started, it prepared a workforce to meet the construction needs, and it generated 18,000 jobs, direct jobs during construction. And it also enabled a subsistence agriculture, and it shifted formal skilled employment into other sectors. Next, please. Another aspect that we would like to highlight in this presentation, in this webinar, is that women and marginalized groups are systematically underrepresented in hydropower workforces. And this document and our work does make a strong case for setting specific measurable targets for women's participation, including through internships and apprenticeships. And this can remove the practical barriers that exclude them, such as lack of childcare, inadequate facilities, and exclusion from community consultation. So this is both an equity imperative and a workforce optimization strategy. Next, please. Another aspect that we actively work on with all of our hydropower projects is to embed community benefits into the project structure from the start. So when we negotiate a project design, we always encourage community benefit sharing mechanisms, as they are the most effective tools for building and maintaining a social license to operate among the communities. And it's also in our shared interest to make sure that the benefits are long-lasting and they also benefit the local at the local level. One example that I would like to highlight here is the Chilime hydropower project in Nepal, where 10% of project shares were issued directly to local individuals at par value giving affected communities direct financial ownership of the asset and ongoing dividend rights tied to the plant's performance for its full operational life. So this benefit sharing can go beyond mandatory resettlement compensation to actively improve the quality of life for affected communities. Other mechanisms, along with revenue and royalty sharing, equity stakes, and productive use of energy. Next, please. So how can we then look at projects from the past for closing this participation gap and what has worked? I would like to highlight NG Brazil's example, where they reserved 50% of all intern, graduate, and apprentice positions for women. They selected 13 female engineers from 2,800 applicants for a year-long paid program, all hired full-time. And the female workforce share rose from 24.4% in 2021 to 26% in 22. A parallel 15-month first job training program for people with disabilities ran concurrently. Another initiative that receives support from us is the Repower program in South Asia. It has about 2,700 plus activities, reaching approximately 68,000 female beneficiaries, and it has placed professional women and female interns in technical jobs. It has supported 900 female mentees through 130 mentors across 33 partner organizations. Another example is how Zambia utilized Cafu George Regional Training Center and how it's also subsidized by the Swedish International Development Cooperation Agency, where they have reduced course fees and directly lowering the financial barrier to technical vocational training that is targeted for hydropower projects. And we have also many more examples in our publications that we will share soon. Next, please. And another point that can often get overlooked from the start when you start designing your hydropower project are the opportunities with our operational maintenance, and then further down the road when you look at modernization such as rehabilitation. This represents a significant and underutilized jobs opportunity. So unlike greenfield construction, rehab projects require high-skilled, long-term employment and offer an ideal environment for technology transfer. So we would like to continue to support our clients to develop strategies for how to both develop the workforce to meet and the needs for upcoming rehab and modernization projects. And then next, please. So these are some of the questions that we often encounter in our project design stage. It is often related to skills. Have we started? When should we start? It is reflected in the value chain development. It starts with mapping out the current value chains in country and then also develop a strategic plan for how to best strengthen the value chains to maximize local content. And we have discussed many of these other ones. So if you would like to go deeper, I would like to make you aware of a couple of key presentations and publications from our end. And you will also find the links shared in this chat. The one is on unveiling sociodynamic benefits in hydropower. We also have a publication, it's called Power with Full Force, that also looks to how to increase participation of women in the workforce. And then we also have IHA's how-to guide on hydropower benefit sharing. In addition, we also have several other publications and guidance on how you can design benefit sharing related to hydropower projects. So with that, I would like to hand it over to my colleague, Juliette Besnard, who will give us more of an example and a direct case study in Burundi.
Thank you, Bente. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Juliette Besnard. I hope you can hear me well. I'm a senior energy specialist at the World Bank based in Burundi. So today I'll talk about job creation and skills development on a specific hydropower project in Burundi, the Jiji and Mulembwe hydro project, which was commissioned last year. So let's first start with a short video, which will give you an overview of the project, and then we'll go into more details.
In the heart of southern Burundi, in the province of Burunga, two rivers, Jiji and Mulembwe, are paving the way for a clean and promising energy future. For years, electricity supply has been insufficient, hampering the daily lives of families and the country's economy. Sector studies showed that the demand far exceeded available supply, with losses on the grid and a heavy reliance on thermal energy.
Vous savez que dans les années passées, on avait des centrales groupes pétrogènes qui consommaient beaucoup de fuel. Et maintenant, avec la mise en service de ces centrales, de Jiji et Mulembwe, nous avons arrêté les centrales thermiques. Maintenant, on a de l'énergie verte et on a alors la résilience climatique.
The Jiji and Mulembwe hydroelectric project is much more than just numbers. It's the story of two runoff river power plants with 49.5 megawatt installed and approximately 235 gigawatt fed into the national grid each year. Thanks to these power plants, the national energy supply has increased by 25%, bringing light and hope to thousands of families.
Les centrales Jiji et Mulembwe, c'est les plus grandes centrales que nous avons ici au Burundi. La centrale de Jiji nous donne à peu près 32,5 MW et la centrale de Mulembwe 17 MW. Ces centrales sont construites sur les normes standards internationaux. Ils comprennent des barrages, des conduites d'amener, des conduites forcées, des centrales, des prises de dons. Et c'est vraiment des centrales qui nous donnent une énergie fiable. Et ça a poussé l'augmentation de la production que nous avons maintenant, autour de 25%, l'augmentation. Les deux centrales de Jiji Mulembwe a renforcé la sécurité énergétique du Burundi et a poussé à être indépendant dans la production de l'énergie électrique.
The construction of these dams mobilized a large workforce, generated regular income, and trained technicians in the field of hydroelectricity for substations and power lines. These skills will remain in the country, representing a human investment in sustainable jobs.
Akarusho nahabonye ni kanini cyane kandi nahongeye ubwenge ubumenyi abadukorana bamwe bavuye mu bihugu byo hanze abandi bavuye mu zindi ntara twage turabonana ndahungura ubwenge
twisunze amafaranga nsanzwe mpembwa ngaha turi n'umuryango birashobora kutubera byiza turiko turategura hanini kuronka uburyo turonka aho tuba tukubaka inzu twisunze amafaranga bazariko baraduhemba naraguze n'akantu nshobora kuzakoreramwo tuzobakamwo nk'inzu hanini nk'ivyo ndabishimira umuyaga nkuba iyi projet yaje ngaha iwacu kuri uyu mutumba wa Musenyi.
Jiji and Mulembwe represent energy for today and tomorrow. More reliability, more energy security, more jobs, and more private investment in Burundi. This dam also plays an important role in Burundi's energy pact as part of Mission 300, an initiative to extend access to electricity to 300 million people in sub-Saharan Africa by 2030.
Thank you for sharing the video. We can go back to the slides. So very briefly, I'll give you some context regarding Burundi's power sector. So Burundi has a very low, so next slide, please. Burundi has a very low access to electricity, 25%, including 8% of grid access, an installed capacity of 202 megawatts, which is highly dominated by hydropower, close to 90%, and increasing participation of private sector, close to 29%. So going into the project, it was a project which brought, as the video said, 49.5 megawatts to the country installed capacity. The two power plants were commissioned in 2025, 5 years after construction and 11 years after board approval. Next slide, please. So going into today's topic, we see that the construction phase was very intense in terms of labor. The workforce growth follows the standard project life cycle for that type of project, with an initial stage which was primarily supported by subcontractors, which were handling preparatory activities, civil work, access roads, and site preparation. And as the project progressed, the workforce increased significantly, with a peak in 2023, so 4 years after the beginning of construction, and the staff of the main contractor, the EPC contractor, became more involved for complex and hydraulic structures. So we see a shift from subcontracted labor to direct employment as works got more intense. So the direct EPC staff mostly focused on the construction of dam, water conveyance work, the tunnels, penstock, and more complex and technical works. During the final phase of the project, there was a focus on mobilizing a specialized workforce with very specific expertise related to the commissioning of activities. Next slide, please. So there was a very strong involvement of local workforce throughout the project. In the contract with the EPC contractor, there was this requirement of at least 30% of labor costs allocated to local workforce. We see that there was a very high proportion of local workforce, especially at the beginning of the construction phase, up to 93% during the first year of construction, when there was the construction of access roads and basic site infrastructure. International experts were mobilized a bit later for highly specialized and sensitive activities, mostly hydraulic works and supervision. So subcontractors with local workforce remain mobilized until the end, also regarding supplementary and finishing work like drainage, corridor development works, etc. Next slide, please. Regarding qualified workshop, so we see that most technical positions were covered by local personnel, mobilized both by the main EPC contractor and some subcontractors. There was a peak of qualified workforce during complex phases of the project. So when there was the construction of tunnels, electromechanical works, and the commissioning phase. So we see the peak of qualified workforce during the 2023-2024. So a strong local base for standard technical activities was complemented by international expertise for more complex tasks and specialized tasks. Next slide, please. So if we look at women employment, we see that overall the female participation remained low throughout the construction phase, and actually below some benchmark level that we've observed for similar projects. There was a slight increase in the last years, but women were overall mainly involved in support to civil works, administrative tasks, and HSE. So there was a very limited presence of women in technical and engineering positions. Next slide, please. So there has been continuous training and capacity building of the workforce throughout project implementation on various topics, continuous HSE training throughout construction, specialized technical and safety training, especially for the delivery of tunnels, electromechanical work, electrical safety, training on GBV and GBV awareness, and then some skills reinforcement on specific topics that were identified over time. Next slide, please. We mentioned the impact of hydropower project on local communities, on direct, indirect, and also induced job. So here is the assessment done by the owner engineer, and we see that there were some direct jobs for local communities, mostly focusing on civil works, creating direct and indirect revenues. There was also some job creation linked to the population relocation and the construction of new home for relocated population. And there was an estimated direct and indirect revenues generated by the project for local communities around 20 million. Next slide, please. So from construction to O&M, while construction phase is of course critical, O&M is as important and tends to be overlooked. So despite mobilization of the project unit throughout the project, the involvement of Regideso staff did not come early enough to build sufficient capacity. So currently 32 O&M staff are mobilized. They were mobilized a few months before commissioning, which implied a limited overlap with the EPC team. The World Bank is financing some technical assistance support to the utility staff for the first 2 years of operation and maintenance to keep building capacity for the utility team. We still see some gaps in terms of skills for specific skills like instrumentation, topography, and advanced maintenance. Another challenge on the O&M and to retain skilled staff is the limited incentives. O&M staff from the national utility have low salary. They live in very isolated sites, which create a high turnover. So this is an example which highlights really the importance of earlier O&M integration in future projects. Next slide, please. So some key lessons from this project to maximize jobs and skills development. So we see here through a very concrete example that hydropower can create sustained skilled employment and not only short-term jobs, but early planning in maximizing local qualification and skill transfer is really critical. In terms of gender, we also see that it requires upstream training and targeted entry points. Otherwise, it remains a challenge, especially for technical and engineering skills. O&M capacity building must start as early as possible and should overlap as much as possible with construction phase. And skills development should be really treated as a core project objective and not only a side aspect of the project. I'll stop here. Thanks a lot for your attention.
Thank you so much for your very interesting presentation, Juliette. And I think that now we are ready to move over to the Q&A part of this webinar. We have collected some of your questions already, and I would like to start with one that can be directed to you, Juliette. It is related to how early community training can be funded. So we refer to the one that can start 1 to 2 years before construction. And also, when IPP projects often reach financial close very late, they're requiring construction to begin almost immediately? Or is there an opportunity to spend some more time to develop the necessary skills? You're muted.
Bente, could you quickly repeat the question? Sorry, I could not hear it
Okay.
very well. You're on mute.
So, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Great. Okay, sorry about that. So the first question relates to how early community training can start, which I refer to begin at least like 1 to 2 years before construction for general labor at the construction site. But I also refer to how we can develop high-skilled labor if you start training 3 to 4 years before. So this requires construction to this timeline indicates the construction starts around financial close, but we do know that there is a bit of a lag. So we were just wondering, how can you, one, find funding for this? And then two, what are the timelines that you used with developing this workforce for Jiji and Mulembwe?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the question. So on the community training, so as I mentioned, the timeline of the project was, so the board approval was in 2014 and construction started in 2020. So there was a long lag due to complicated political situation at the beginning, and then procurement took a lot of time for the EPC contractor. And so on the community training, the local workforce, which was mobilized at the very beginning of the project, was for basic civil work, road access, and basic site infrastructure, like building the base camp, etc. So it started before going into really hydraulic works. There was at least 2 years of construction which involved the local community, and the supervision was done by international staff from the EPC contractor. So the training was done during these first 2 years. On the timeline and construction, the construction started in 2020, right in the middle of COVID. So I'm not sure it's the best example, because basically the training was done, the subcontractors were mobilized at the very beginning, and we see that in the first year there was the workforce is mostly coming from subcontractors which were already trained on other hydro projects. Burundi has other hydropower plants, and there is this those skills which were already in the country through local subcontractors, at least for the first phases of construction. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Juliette. We also have a question. We are interested to learn more and hear more about financial returns and how the community sharing benefit sharing mechanism work in practice. So I think I will respond to that, and I also would like to let everybody know that you could find more details on this example in the unveiling socioeconomic benefits for hydropower report. But with one of the World Bank supported projects in Lao PDR, Namton 2, it has an installation around 1 gigawatt, and it generates considerable amounts of electricity. The project is designed to also export electricity to neighboring countries, and it contributes about, at the time, $25 million annually to the government budget. But in addition to that, with the aggregated benefits, an economic analysis estimates that a net benefit of $550 million will be injected to Lao PDR, primarily from electricity exports by the end of the concession period for the hydropower project. And then the government, they set up a community and also one that reached more to national levels, because the revenues and the profits from the electricity exports were then allocated to different areas in the society. So that relates to both education, health, public works and transport, other energy, mining and agriculture projects, natural resources and environmental aspects, poverty reduction fund, and projects implemented by provinces. So this means that the revenue from the hydropower projects itself are at a scale that is not only for the local community in geographical areas surrounding the hydropower project, but is for the communities and for the population of the country. And one of those results clearly show that the poverty reduction trend is a remarkable change, and it has also contributed to propel Lao PDR towards reducing the poverty in the country. So I think that we are then going to move on to another question that's related to how we are able to track indirect and induced jobs impacts at project level. So I would like to bring Adwa in to respond to that.
So thank you very much for that. For the indirect and induced jobs at the project level, we usually use some multipliers, which are economic multipliers that we have estimated internally to be able to do that. But more importantly, what we actually focus most of our estimation on are the jobs that are related to our development outcome, which is the energy that we provide, and also the ones that we can directly track at the project level, which are the direct jobs. I also have to add that there are induced jobs are typically based on the direct and indirect jobs, and in a lot of our countries, the local content are very low, and so we are unable to have a significant portion of indirect jobs that has implications for how the induced jobs are estimated. So we use some multipliers at the country level, which we refine over time as we keep working in those countries. Thank you. I don't know if that answers my question.
It does. Thank you so much, Adwa. We are keeping track on the questions that try to come in here. And we also have another one which also relates a bit more to the specifics of how you define a local workforce. And it is a good question. I was wondering if this is something that you have thought about in the Jiji and Mulembwe project, Juliet.
So, yeah, I mean, basically the local workforce is defined by basically the workers who are coming from the country. I mean, there was some international staff coming with very highly specialized expertise, mobilized at specific phases of the project. But overall, what we've seen is that throughout the construction phase, most works were done by this local workforce who has been trained by and supervised by the EPC contractor and direct employers from the EPC contractor. I don't know if that answers the question, but yeah.
Thank you, Juliette. What I also noticed in our chat is that we have several questions related to how you structure a training programs and when the timing is and how you fund that. And who are the entities that the different participants here refer to varies a bit, but I think that there are some commonalities in this question because we do recognize that there is a challenge to develop skills and start early enough. And then also there is a challenge to identify the correct sources of funding for this. And these are usually a part of the World Bank programs that we could support clients with. But I also think that we have a very good case here with the Jiji and Mulembwe project. So is this something that you can share a bit more consideration on, Juliette?
Yeah, so the training program was really part of the EPC contract. So that was a contractual requirement. And then the program itself was designed in collaboration with the owner engineer and the utility, Régie des Eaux. So I would say that, those three players jointly define a training program, which was adjusted during the different phases of construction. And for instance, on HSE, at some point, it became a highly sensitive and topic for the project with a lot of incidents, etc. So HSE training were strengthened throughout, the staff mobilized on the project, and we could see then an impact on the number of incidents, and we could see really the results of that strengthened training. So I think there was this basic program, and then some aspects were threatened given basically the difficulties and the challenges that the EPC contractor and the project overall faced.
Thank you. And I think that we also have examples from other hydropower projects that the World Bank supports. So if we look to a recent board approval of a program related to DRC, one part of that program and a key part of that program is to prepare the country for the hydropower project. And that involves and entails developing skills within the population in the country so that they can take the construction jobs and also move forward to create the better jobs and the higher skilled jobs. And again, these skilled jobs and they are also transferable to other projects and other construction projects that will occur in the future. So the structure and the design of that program is, of course, something that the client and the country's government is looking deep into, and then the World Bank is supporting that process. And I think that we will conclude the questions and answer session for today. And then I would really like to welcome Debbie Gray from IHA to give some closing remarks.
Great. Thank you very much, Bente, and thank you so much to our speakers. That was really interesting to hear about all the jobs that can be created by hydropower and how the impacts, how we can have some positive impacts on communities. There's one aspect which we touched on a little bit briefly, which I'd just like to go into a little bit more in my closing remarks, and that is getting the skilled people to come and to work for hydropower companies during both the development or construction phase, as well as during the operational phase. I've seen a few reports and heard some anecdotes that hydropower operators are really struggling to get the skilled people that are required. So we actually did a study a couple of years ago, and there was a global study, and there was a bit of a common theme that the hydropower operators are all struggling to get people with the right skills to come in to work for them. And there's also an issue about a bit of an aging workforce. So they see a wave of retirements coming in the next 5 to 10 years, but they are not necessarily attracting the young people to come in and to develop the skills to replace those people who are retiring. And also, let's not forget, when we talk about jobs in the hydropower sector, we tend to think of the engineering jobs or the skilled trades. Think, of course, a lot of engineering in the electrical, mechanical, and civil works. But there's also there's a huge variety in the hydropower sector, probably more than some of the other renewable energy sectors. I'm talking about biologists, fish biologists, wildlife specialists, community outreach specialists, communications people, hydrologists. So we need all of those skills really to make a hydropower project happen. There are probably a lot of people who are on this call who actually work in the hydropower sector and therefore have a specific interest in this. So I'd like to leave with a little bit of a challenge to everybody who is out there. I've been in the hydropower sector for over 25 years now, and I find that we're really great about talking about how much we like our work, what a great sector it is, the positive impacts that it can have. But perhaps one area where we struggle is in getting that word out to people outside of the sector. So I'm giving a little bit of a challenge to you. Look at the workforce, try to anticipate some issues you might have with an aging workforce, and then go out into the communities, speak to young people as early as elementary school to get them to know about hydropower, to get them excited about STEM and the skilled trades, and then work to try to make the hydropower sector a more attractive place to work, because there's a lot of competition out there. So speak, be ambassadors of your own company and of your own sector, and speak to the value and the skilled and the high-paying jobs that are available in the hydropower sector. Finally, to end on a bit of a personal note, Bente, you mentioned that, and Juliette as well had some statistics about women being really a minority in the hydropower sector. I can completely concur from my own personal experience, but also I was pleased to do the research and analysis for the report that Bente mentioned earlier, Power with Full Force, which is really a baseline study to look at the number of women in the hydropower sector globally. And globally, that figure is about 25%. And it concluded that, yes, women are underrepresented specifically in the science and engineering fields. But this report also examined some of the factors of why that is and gave some recommendations on how to attract more women into the hydropower sector. So we at the IHA, we're doing a few things to try to attract people in general, particularly women in the hydropower sector. For example, we support the Women in Hydropower Mentorship Program, because mentorship was seen to be one of the ways to try to encourage more people to come into the sector. So I'll leave it at that. I just wanted to also congratulate ESMAP for this work and for their various reports that have been done and presented today, and really for considering the human element of hydropower and by making it, as you say, your North Star. And at IHA, we're really pleased to collaborate with ESMAP on this webinar and on the whole webinar series. So thank you very much, and back to you, Bente.
Thank you so much, Debbie, for those closing remarks. And yes, I think that our work when it comes to also highlighting the need for more women in the hydropower sector is clearly needed. So I really appreciate that you brought that more forth. I would also like to highlight the fact that we will continue with our webinar series. So we will have a bit of a break over summer, but we will return on September 29th. And we will probably then also go a bit more into the technical details for modernization of hydropower projects. So please do join us for the next session as well. And then I wish you everybody a good day and afternoon and evening.